If you're a fantasy football beginner this season, glad you joined us. Welcome to a lifelong obsession. When it's time for your very first draft, you want to make sure that you don't make those rookie mistakes. So, we're going to help you out. Here's 7 things you don't want to do. So, let's start with round one. You want to get the guy who's going to be the captain of your team. And a lot of people think that's got to be the quarterback, right? Give me Josh Allen, give me Lamar Jackson. We're going to say no. Why would we do that, Chris?
Well, I mean, you look just historically. First of all, you're talking about stud players in round one that can score just as many or more points than those elite quarterbacks, and they're at positions that are more important. But also, you can obviously find quarterbacks later in the draft that can give you production similar to those guys or close to it. I mean, last year, Baker Mayfield had scored more points per game than Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels. You look at guys like Goff, Bo Nix, others, they were very close in points per game. There are other quarterbacks. It's a deep position. You can find guys later. It's more important to get those running backs and wide receivers early. I'm not saying you have to wait too long on quarterback, but for me, round one, even round two, most times too early for a quarterback. Round three in your shallower leagues, I'll start considering it. Round four in your deeper leagues, but not before that.
Right. I mean, like, we're not saying wait forever and just settle for whoever the Colts quarterback is, or, you don't want a bad quarterback, but at the same time, there are always guys available in the middle rounds who wind up being top 10 quarterbacks, and it's really not that big a difference. Honestly, if you look at the stats last year, guys like Bo Nix, who weren't drafted everywhere, Sam Darnold, boring Jared Goff, those guys average just like 2 points fewer per game than your Jalen Hurts is, your Jaden Daniels, those guys. It's nice to feel like you've got that great quarterback, but honestly, statistically, it doesn't make that big a difference. Don't spend your first round pick just on a quarterback. All right, now something we never advocate doing at the end game here is following the crowd. Don't just do what everyone else is doing. And so when you see that run taking place, everybody's getting their RB2, everyone's getting a tight end. I gotta get. No, you don't.
No, you definitely don't. And not only do you not have to, you shouldn't, because think about it. If it's your pick and there have been 4 or 5 straight running backs taken, you're now taking the number 5 or number 6 running back, which means they're probably not that good anymore. You're better off taking the other positions where the value currently lies, right? Because so many running backs have come off the board that the running back value is diminishing, but wide receiver value is probably very strong. So don't feel that pressure. I know we hear this a lot, like on the streams when we do our mock drafts, and people said, well, I felt like I had to get my RB2 there, so I took some not very good running back just to get the running back because the running backs were flying off the board. It's okay. You can get a not very good running back around later and instead get like a really good wide receiver, tight end, whatever at the other position. So yeah, don't feel like just because everybody in your league is starting to take a position, whether it's running back, wide receiver, whatever it is, don't feel like you have to follow suit. In fact, it's better that you don't. Do you want to win your fantasy league but don't have time to do all the research? Are you tired of drafting mediocre teams and then having to constantly hope you hit it big on the waiver wire just to compete? Do you wish you could have a fantasy expert like Pierre or myself with you while you draft? Well, now you can. With our app DraftLane and our live draft pilot, we will guide you through every pick of your draft and tell you exactly which players we would pick if we were on the clock. Our proprietary algorithm will take into account your league settings, scoring, and roster requirements to identify the best picks every time you are on the clock to ensure you have a winning team from week one. It's the closest thing you can get to having us there drafting with you. Get the biggest edge in fantasy football. Just go to your app store and search for DraftLane and download it today and get ready to dominate your draft.
Now, with that in mind, here's mistake number 3. You worried about the positions, right? You got to get, this many running backs, this many receivers, and you want to make sure you fill out your roster, sure, but sometimes you can worry too much about having what we call balance. And, in life, balance is good, but in fantasy football, not always.
Honestly, I'll give you a little life hack. Balance isn't even good in life, but it's certainly not good in fantasy football. Yeah, we see this a lot. Like people say, like, well, if I take or they ask us on our streams, like if I take a running back in round 1, what wide receiver should I get in round 2? And I'm like, what do you mean, what wide receiver? Like, why aren't you asking me what player you should get in round 2? You should not worry. Like your round 1 pick should not influence your round 2 pick or vice versa. If the best player on the board in round 2 is a wide receiver and you took a wide receiver in round 1, just take another wide receiver. I assume your league lets you start at least 2 of them, if not more. Same with running back, same with whatever position. You don't want to feel like, you have to have this perfect balance where you go running back, wide receiver, QB, tight end in your first 4 picks. That's a recipe for losing your draft.
And you'll see if you watch our mock drafts with our community, very smart people, they know exactly what to do here, you'll see a lot of teams wait until like the last 2 rounds to take their starting quarterback and their starting tight end. They don't care if they're the last, the second to last to have that position. This whole thing of balance, it doesn't matter as long as you've got good enough players at every position. But with that in mind, here's the question is, what makes a good player, right? I mean, how do we know a guy's going to be good? And so here's what we don't want you to do. Don't pick a safe player, a guy who's boring, and just because you feel like, what, he's the guy who was the starter last year, he's going to be the starter this year. This other guy's too risky. I don't want to take on risk. You do want to take on some risk. You know what? Don't be scared to draft those risky players, those guys with huge upside, even if it doesn't pan out, because you've heard this, we've been saying this for years. Upside wins championships, and now you're hearing it all over the place in the fantasy community. So what does that mean, though? What's an example of a guy who's an upside player as opposed to a safe, boring player?
Well, I think the perfect example this year is probably Christian McCaffrey, right? I mean, you're either on two sides of the fence here. Either you're on the side that, like, yeah, this guy has the potential to win fantasy leagues, or you're on the side that he's too risky because of injury risk. And yes, injury risk is a real thing, but guess what? It's a real thing for every single player that steps on the football field, no matter what. But let me look back to last year. We have perfect examples of this. Cincinnati backfield. Zach Moss was considered the starter, the safer pick between him and Chase Brown. What ended up happening? Chase Brown won your fantasy league. What about Brian Thomas Jr.? When we looked at the rookie receivers, like Marvin Harrison Jr. was considered safer. Malik Neighbors was considered safer. Who was better? Brian Thomas Jr. was much better. And then Terry McLaurin. I've been talking a lot about Calvin Ridley this year with Cam Ward. A lot of people are like, it's too risky. It's a rookie. Well, people said the same thing about Terry McLaurin last year with Jaden Daniels. Sometimes you got to take that risk. This is fantasy football. We're trying to finish first. We're not trying to finish fifth. We're not trying to finish sixth. I mean, maybe you are. Maybe you finish last every year and you would just be happy to be sixth. But look, come on. Let's try to win a league here.
Yeah, and you're like, well, I don't want to take on too many chances. These guys might bust and might wind up getting cut. Guess what? Those safe players that you wind up taking, they can get cut just as easily. All right, following up on that, here's another thing that you don't want to do. It's take a guy who you feel is safe because, man, he was so good 3 years ago. I mean, he's been elite since 2018. Maybe not last year, but if you're living in the past, your fantasy team is going to be left behind. Don't draft based on name value. You've got to look ahead.
Exactly. We see this every year, right? We see, like, right now the Travis Kelce's of the world. People are like, wow, look at the value on Travis Kelce. Really? Is there a value on Travis Kelce? This guy had 800 yards and 3 touchdowns last year, despite having more targets than the year before. I mean, just because you see a guy's name and you recognize the name and you remember, like, yeah, back in 2021, Cooper Kupp was a stud. This isn't 2021. It's 2025. We got to look ahead and try to project who are going to be the studs this year. Look, it's a sad part, right? We don't want these great players to ever not be great. We want them to be great every year, but it's a reality of the game. Father Time is undefeated. Father Time comes for everybody, and when it's come for these players, you don't have to draft them. Let somebody else in your league take these guys on name value. You take guys who are actually going to score points.
Yeah, and look, these guys were great once upon a time. You're not trying to win the championship from 2021. You need to win it for the 2025 season. It's become almost kind of a running joke in our drafts, and who's going to take Nick Chubb. Look, it's just not going to happen. Even if they give him the ball over and over and over again, he's not going to win you a championship. You don't have to be the guy that drafts him. Another mistake beginners make a lot is, don't worry about injuries. In fact, I'm getting an injury discount. This guy will be great in the second half of the season, and it doesn't always happen that way. In fact, injury often just leads to re-injury.
Right, and I do want to clarify what we mean by injury here. We don't mean a guy who missed a few days of camp because of a knee soreness or something like that. We're talking players who are entering the season injured. Very rarely does this work out for players. I'm talking about, Brandon Ayuk right now coming off a major ACL injury. Doesn't look like he's going to be healthy to start the season. You really don't need Brandon Ayuk. Same with Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon right now dealing with a foot injury. We don't even know what's going on. They're being very secretive about it, but it sounds like he might not even be ready to start the season. Guys who are hurt outside of maybe, the obvious studs, like Puka's an example last year where he was hurt to start the season, ended up still being great. Okay, sure. Those guys, you're going to stash them. But once you get past the studs, You don't need to draft a guy who's not a stud, who's entering the season already hurt.
And I think that goes twofold for rookies who miss significant time right here in the preseason, during exhibition season, those games. Training camp is the most valuable time for them. And unless they're a first rounder, right, one of these elite picks, so they're going to be involved. A lot of times, guys just fighting for their spot on the depth chart. If they're missing that time, it's just not going to happen this season because they're just starting from way too far behind. All right, and number 7 on the list as far as mistakes, but I think maybe the number one most common mistake beginners would make is, look, we want you to be prepared, but don't go into the draft with it all mapped out and think you know exactly how it's going to go.
Exactly, because I've been in so many drafts where I think even when during the course of the draft where I'm like, man, I really hope I get this guy with my next pick, but I don't think he's going to make it back to me. And then he makes it back to me. Or I'm debating between two players. I pick one. And then the other guy comes all the way back to me when I thought there was no chance. So many times we get questions okay, I think I'm going to go, I have the 7th pick. I'm going to pick player X in round 1, and then I'm going to pick player X in round 2. So then in round 3, do you think I should go with player Y or player Z? It's well, first of all, how do you even know who's going to be on the board when it's your pick for those first 2 picks? And second of all, how do you know who's going to be there in round 3? You just don't know. You don't know how your league mates value players unless maybe you've played with them forever, but then you're probably not a beginner and you're not watching this video. So look, it's one thing to go into a draft with the strategy of hey, I think wide receivers are more valuable in this league than running backs, or running backs are more valuable, or, I can wait on it. Those strategies are great, but you don't want to go in with a preset strategy of I'm going running back in round 1, then wide receiver in round 2, and then whatever. No, just see how the draft comes to you and grab the best players.
And the big problem is that you just assume I'm getting this player in this round, or I'm going to take this position, or this is what's going to happen. As soon as it doesn't happen the way you expected, you don't know what to do because your plan is out the window, and then you're going to have to panic, and then it goes exactly the opposite of what you had planned. You've got to be prepared for all the possible scenarios, but don't assume you know what's going to happen, because just like in football, we don't really know. Or whether you're a beginner or not, those are some mistakes you just want to avoid at all costs. Don't do it. We have plenty of other draft advice and talk about some players that you do want to pick. It's all here on this playlist.